Hey there. Today I'm going to show you something very special. Something we think is going to drastically improve the time it takes for you to build your web apps. And here it is. It's called the Builder plugin. You can use the Builder plugin to create new plugins and then manage your database, models, permission structure, backend navigation, controllers, version history, and also localization. Builder is a rapid application development tool that takes care of the more boring activities and makes programming fun again. It's an important fact that the output generated by Builder is no different to files that you would write by hand. So you might notice there's a little arrow over here. If we click that, it shows the list of available plugins. So let's get started and create our first plugin. So I'm going to call this plugin Library, and the author name can be Acme. We can also select an icon from the drop-down list here, and I'll go with Book. Then we'll just click OK to create the plugin. And there's our new plugin, Library. So once we have the Library plugin selected, the first thing we should do now is create a table for our plugin. So every library has some books, so let's call this table Books. Then we need to add some table columns. The first table column we should add is an ID. That should be an integer, and we'll also make it auto-incrementing. This will be used as our primary key for the table. Then we should add perhaps a title, and also a slug, and perhaps an author as well, and maybe a year, and a short description. The first four columns should be of strings, and the short description should be text. It's also a good idea to make the columns nullable, and then we can go ahead and save this. So check this out. What we've got here is the PHP code necessary to build the database table. And once we hit save and apply, this will generate a real migration file and save it in the plugin directory. Look at all this code that we didn't have to write. So let's go ahead and hit save and apply. Now the table that we're seeing here and the table structure has been applied to our database. The next thing we might like to do is create a model. So we'll click add and then enter the class name. We'll call this book. Then select the database table, which is already pre-selected, and then click OK. Now, just like the migration file, the model class that was created is also saved into the plugin directory. Now we can use this model to define our form fields and list columns. So let's start with the form fields. If we click the plus symbol here, it will open a new tab for us where we can define our form fields. Notice the file name defaults to fields.yaml. We could call this anything we like. We could call it myfields if we wanted to. But let's just leave this as the default for now. And we'll add our first form control. So we click this placeholder here, add control. Then we'll select a field type of text. Now if we empty out the field name here and just type in T, you can see it's got the autocomplete fields based on the names that we gave in our database table. So this one will use title. And for the label, we could just enter title here as well as plain text. But the builder allows us to create translatable user interfaces. So if we click the plus sign here, we can actually create a language key for this label. So we might enter the key as book.title with the default value of title as well. There you can see it's automatically generated a language key for us, and I'll show you how that works a bit later on. So now we can close this. And we've got our first form field called title for our book model. Just to show you something cool here, I actually prefer to have the inspector pinned to the side, and you can do that by clicking this little icon here. So now the properties of the control are shown in the right hand side. So let's change the title to make it required. We'll click the required icon and then we can close it. Let's also collapse the file name by clicking this icon here, and that'll give us a bit more room. So we'll add our next control by clicking add control, and this will be for the slug. So the slug will also be text, And then for the field name, if we just enter S, you can see the magic of auto completion has given us the field name of slug. And then for the label, we'll want this to be a language string also, so click plus. And then as we're entering the key name, if we just enter B, you can see this also has auto completion, which is a very handy feature to have. And then we'll just call this book.slug, and we'll give it a default value of slug, just like we did for the title field. We can also use a feature here to automatically generate the slug from the title form field. We can do that by selecting Advanced, and then down here you've got Preset, and we want to preset this field from the title field, and we want to make this a slug. And so now when somebody enters the text in the title, it will automatically generate a slug based on the text that they've entered. So I'm just going to power through the next two form fields that we've got for author and year. So I'm just going to add these here. And there we go. So we've got the title, the slug, the author, and the year. The last field we probably want to add is the short description. So here we're going to click Add Control again, but this time we're going to select the Rich Editor type under Widgets. Since this will be a larger form field, we should also set the span to say full. That means the field will span across the full width of the page. And we can also set a size too, so we can maybe set this to be large. Okay, so let's fill out the field name, which was S short description, and we'll also add the language key. And there we go. We've defined the form fields for our book model. After clicking Save, let's go into the file system and have a look at our work so far. Alright, so I've just opened my favorite code editor and navigated to the plugins directory and then Acme library, which is the plugin that we're working on now. And you can see that the Builder plugin has built us a plugin registration file. It's also built a migration file when we were defining our database table, along with the version history file. And it's also created us a book model. And along with the book model, we also have our form fields. So again, here's all this code that we didn't have to write, thanks to Builder. So, we've successfully defined how our book should appear when used in a form. Now we should define how multiple books should appear when used in a list. We do that by clicking the plus sign next to lists here. And this will create a list column definition file. Now I'm going to collapse the sidebar to make more room because my screen's a little bit small. So for the first column, we'll call it title. And as you can see here, the autocomplete works just the same way as the form fields. And for the label, we can enter plain text if we like, so we could say title and just leave that as plain text. But we can also use the language keys that we've already created. So we could reuse the ones from the form fields. So if I enter title here, you can see I can pre-select the language key called book.title. So we'll select that and we'll give this a type of text and make sure we can search this column and also sort by this column. So I'm just going to quickly do a couple more columns here. I'll just call one author and we can reuse the string author. And I'll also add one for year. So there's our list column definitions, and just like before, this will create a real file in our plugin directory. So let's go ahead and save and move on to the next section. So the next feature I'd like to show you is permissions. So if we click permissions in the menu, this will open a new tab called permissions. Here we can define the permission structure for our plugin. So we may want to add a new action called manage books. And so we enter that here in the permission code section. And for the tab title, we can enter a plain string if we like, so library, or we can use a language string. And as you can see, we've got one called plugin.name. So let's go ahead and use that one. For the label, we should probably create a new language string. So we'll click the plus sign here and we'll call this books, manage books, and we'll give it a string of the same name. Then we'll click Save to create our new permission structure. Let's move on to the backend menu. Here we can create menu items provided by this plugin. So we might like to create a new menu item, and we'll need to give this a code, so we'll probably call it library. And also a label, we'll call that library as well. And we also have to select an icon. So I'll probably just use the same one I had before, which was book. And here you can see we can also define permissions which control the visibility of this menu item. So we'll use the permission we created before called manage books. And once we've added that, we'll click OK. And then we might like to add a sub-menu item. And we might call this books and give it a label of books as well. And then we'll give this an icon of bookmark perhaps. We'll leave the URL field blank for now because we'll have to come back to that in just a sec, but then we'll save this menu. And now we've defined a menu structure for our plugin. The next section is where we tie all this good stuff together and create a new backend page. Another word for a backend page is a controller. So I'll just pin this down and then click the Add button. We'll give this controller a name of books, and also select the model that we created before and choose which menu item should be active when we're viewing this page. We'll also tick the list and form controller behaviors because we have definitions for those, and select the permissions that are required to view this page. From here, you can see our controller has a list for displaying books and also contains a form for managing books. These are called behaviors and can be configured as well. So if we click on the list behavior, we'll need to tell it about the columns file that we created here. We'll also need to tell the form about the fields we created here. The behaviors are pretty well pre-configured by default, so we'll just save the controller now. As a final step, we should go back to our menu and tell it about the new controller that we just created. So if I select books and then enter the word book, you can see the autocomplete has picked up that we have a new controller. So I'll select that URL here, and I'll do the same thing for the library menu item. There we go. So I'll save this. We should now be able to access our new page via the back end. I'll just hit F5 here to refresh the page. And there you can see our library menu item has appeared. So let's click it and take it for a spin. I'm going to demonstrate this by adding a few books here. And you can see the slug has automatically been generated by the title, as we expect. There's our first book. Let's add one more. Great book. And one more for good measure. Okay, so now we have 3 books. So let's just step back and look at this for a moment. I mean, just look at it. You've really got to stand in awe at how easy that was to set up the scaffold for your models, your database, backend forms, a list. And really, you don't even have to use the October front end at this point. You could just use the backend, say for an iPhone app API, or you could use this just for front-end MVC. Whatever the case, this is a solid backend that works and you can slap together in a matter of minutes. To me, that's a real game changer. There really is nothing else like this, and I'm incredibly excited to be showing it to you today. Now let's have a look at the localization features. If we click the localization menu item here, you can see there's one language called EN. Now we can add more languages if we like, but let's open the EN one for now. Here we can see all the language strings that we've created so far. So we could change the plugin name to something else, for example, and it will update everywhere throughout the Builder interface. Pretty cool, huh? It also makes it easy for you to create new languages and also import any new language strings. So if we created a new language called RU for Russian, for example, we could click this Add Missing Strings button, and it'll go and fetch any strings that we don't have in the current language file. This makes it super easy to do translations, and we think this is a much needed feature that everyone will enjoy for creating multilingual plugins. Lastly, let's look at versions. I won't go into too much detail here, but you can see there are two versions that have been created so far. This is the first version that comes with all new plugins, and you can see a second version where we've gone and added the library books table. From here we have the ability to roll back the migration, and we can also apply the migration again. But I won't do that because we'll lose all the books that we've created so far. So that covers the ins and outs of the Builder interface in the back end. Builder also comes with a few CMS components that we can use to display our books on the front end. So let's go and create a new page, and we'll call this page Book Details. We'll need a URL parameter called slug, so we know which book to view. And here in the Components tab, you can see under the Builder section, we have two components, one called Record Details and one called Record List. In this case, we want Record Details, so we'll drag that into the markup, and inspecting the component properties, you can see that it takes a model class, which we can select as our book. We can also change the identifier value to slug, because we've defined it as slug and not ID, and we'll take the key column from slug as well. Notice that the autocomplete also displays the available attributes that we can use. And for the display column, we'll use title. Great. So if we save the page, let's go and create another one for displaying a list of books. This page we can call Books, and we'll drag the component Record List instead. Just like Book Details, we can select the model class, and we'll also link to the details page that we just created, making sure that we use the slug for the URL parameter and key name. We'll also display the title as the display column. Now if we save this page and preview it in the browser, you can see we have a list of books. So if I click on one of these books, it will take us to the detail page. It's not very glorious at the moment, but if we go back to the book detail page, we can expand this component by clicking the little fork here, and this will show the inner markup that we can use to build a more interesting detail page. So we might like to wrap the attribute, the display column attribute, in a header, and we could also say record short description. And since this is going to be HTML, we have to use the raw filter so it outputs accordingly. Now let's go back and have a look at one of our books. And you can see already our page is starting to take shape. So that's just a quick rundown on the Builder plugin. By comparison, what we've done here in just minutes would take a staggering amount of time to do in a regular framework. Builder essentially cuts out all the boring bits in web dev so you can focus on the things that matter, like the business logic. This overall concept has taken many years to perfect, so we really hope you enjoy it. That's all for today. Take care and goodbye.